but it's time to go.
Hello and welcome to another special episode of Superhero Club, your go-to show all about comic book inspired original series on Prime Video. I'm your host, Stephanie Williams. Before we get too far in, if you want more superhero content like this, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Today we are highlighting Atom Eve from Invincible, a superhero who has never had a problem speaking up or changing matter just from sheer will and a flick of her wrist. First, we'll dive into some of Atom Eve's comic history, then we'll examine how it compares to the Atom Eve introduced in the Invincible animated series. Atom Eve makes her comic book debut in Invincible number 2. But we'll start with her original story, which appears much later in one of the backup stories featured in Invincible number 25. Atom Eve's real name is Samantha Eve Wilkins. She was born to Arias Brandyworth and an unnamed mother who did not survive giving birth to Samantha since her powers were already active while she was in the womb. When she was born, an agent named Steven Erickson, who worked at the Global Defense Agency, wanted to use Samantha as a weapon and went to the hospital to retrieve her, but Brandyworth faked his daughter's death using the miscarried child of Bessie and Adam Wilkins, who would later become Samantha's adoptive parents. We learn more about Samantha's life in Invincible Presents Atom Eve. During Samantha's childhood, she was raised by the Wilkins, none the wiser about her true origins. Her biological father, Brandyworth, goes on to watch his daughter from a distance from an early age. There were signs that Samantha wasn't an average child. Case in point, her first word was CH2OH, the hydroxymethyl chemical group. She helped her babysitter with his high school level science homework as a toddler. Samantha would later start attending a school for young scholars, but was kicked out because she wasn't fulfilling their standards. This caused a heated argument between her and her adoptive father, who was often at odds with Samantha to begin with. Shortly after the argument, Samantha discovers her powers of transmutation after turning the meal her adoptive mother brought up to her room from chicken into a cheeseburger. Samantha would go on to practice her abilities on different objects. The first time Samantha used her powers in a crime-fighting capacity, she saved some puppies from thieves. This was also the same night her biological father, Brandyworth, finally made direct contact. He tells Samantha about her powers of transmutation, how she got those powers because of him, and that she was made to be a government weapon. Brandyworth also shares that he fell in love with her birth mother, which made him change his mind about turning his baby into a weapon. He then warns Samantha not to use her powers so that she doesn't attract the government's attention. Samantha doesn't listen and continues using her powers. Fast forward to years later when Samantha is a preteen and she starts wearing a mask and calling herself Atom Eve. At this point, she's also gotten better at using her powers. She can fly, create force fields, an energy blast, and use telekinesis. Atom Eve re-encounters Brandyworth after a group of superpowered children kidnaps him. During the fight, Brandyworth reveals to Atom Eve that she is omnipotent and therefore mental blocks were installed in her mind. As she defeats the superpowered children, she and Brandyworth are taken into custody by Agent Steven Erickson, who kills Brandyworth and reveals to Atom Eve that her biological mother is still alive and that those children were experimental attempts to recreate Eve. However, Atom Eve doesn't get to sit with the discovery long because Erickson also kills her mother right in front of her. Atom Eve goes into a state of rage, allowing her to override her mental blocks and use her powers to erase Erickson's memories. That was all her backstory revealed later in the comics. So let's catch up to Atom Eve's comic debut in Invincible number 2. Here, she is already a member of the team as they stumble upon Mark Grayson, aka Invincible, taking on the Mola twins. The next day, Eve discovers she and Mark attend the same school, where they later find out her physics teacher, David Hiles, is turning students into human bombs. Until the demise of the Guardians of the Globe, Atom Eve had been in a romantic relationship with her fellow team member, Rex Globe. On the night of member tryouts for the new Guardians of the Globe team, Eve finds Rex cheating on her with Duplicate. She quits Team and begins going on missions with Invincible. They take on the Lizard League together, and she also goes on some solo missions too. The friendship grows as Invincible and Adam Eve continue working together and hanging out at school. At some point, Eve does begin to have some romantic interest in Mark, but that's put on hold when she sees Mark with Amber. Eve briefly dates William Clarkwell, Invincible's best friend in the comics. They get together while bonding over their shared concern for Mark after his fight with his father. William knows that she's Adam Eve, and just like when he asked Mark to take him for a flight, he asks the same of Eve. The two split up shortly after high school graduation, and right after that, Eve leaves for Africa where she feels she can use her powers for the greater good by helping those in need. She always wanted to use her powers for good, but assumed being a superhero was the best way. Alright, we're going to put a pin in Adam Eve's coming deep dive, but we promise to revisit again later. For now, we're going to move on to the version of the character we've gotten to know in the Invincible animated series. Similar to the comics, we will talk about Adam Eve's origin story, which gets a focus in her special episode, Invincible Adam Eve. The Adam Eve origin episode isn't too different from her comic origin, but some minor changes are worth discussing as they enrich her story. So just like in the comic book series, Adam Eve's real name is still Samantha Eve Wilkins. But what's different is Eve's biological mother finally has a name, and it's Polly. She was a pregnant young woman who was unhoused and living on the streets when she first encountered Brandyworth. Unlike the comics, Brandyworth is not Eve's biological father, but he is still a scientist who developed the experiment that gave her her powers. Instead, her father is unknown, and it's Eve's mother, Holly, who volunteered herself for the experimental procedure that gave Eve her powers in utero. Holly wanted her daughter to have just as much of a normal life as possible and begged Brandyworth to ensure that happened. He does what he can to keep their promise. After Polly dies during childbirth, Brandyworth keeps Eve away from Agent Erickson by switching her with a stillborn child of Bessie and Adam Wilkins. Like in the comics, Brandyworth keeps his distance from Eve while she grows up with the Wilkins. During her childhood, Eve demonstrates a high affinity for science. Her adoptive father is indifferent to her, and she discovers her powers after being sent to her room post-argument with her adoptive father. Also, like in the comics, Brandyworth finally makes direct contact with Eve after she saves animals from thieves. The episode, Invincible Adam Eve, adds some layers to other areas of Eve's life that were touched on in the comics. Eve struggles with making friends, and we get to see how that impacts her during her formative years and later when we meet her as a high schooler. Eve is also one heck of a determined person, which is on full display during her fight with the experimental children who were made in an attempt to recreate what Brandyworth was able to do to Eve while her mother was pregnant with her. When we meet Adam Eve in the first season of Invincible, in episode 2, she's with the teen team just like in the comics, but her first encounter with Invincible happens while an alien race, the Flaxans, attack Earth. Eve saves Invincible by creating a force field. While fighting off the Flaxan, Adam Eve demonstrates that she is definitely someone who has been practicing using her powers for a while. Eve is also attending the same school as Mark, and once the two begin talking, they quickly become friends and crime-fighting colleagues. Eve is one of the first people Mark can be open and vulnerable with about getting used to his powers and having bad nerves before taking on villains. In turn, Eve can be a bit vulnerable with Mark. Eve is furious when she discovers that Rexplode is cheating on her with Duplicate, but she doesn't take that anger out until she goes up against the Hunk during trials for the new Guardians of the Globe. She's offered a spot on the team but declines because Rex and Kate also make the new Guardians and she didn't want anything to do with them. In the comics, Eve and Amber aren't friends and are barely acquaintances. In the show, they eventually build a friendship. It's actually thanks to Amber inviting Eve to volunteer at the Beckwell Community Center that later plays into Eve considering other ways she can use her powers for the greater good. Eve's complicated relationship with her parents ultimately makes her leave home and create a place for herself in a treehouse, but she is still someone who puts the needs of others before herself, which makes her the superhero she is, and is also evident in the way that she acts like a counselor between Amber and Mark, even though she has feelings for Mark. After the epic fight between Invincible and Omni-Man, Eve gets closer to Amber and William while they bond over their shared concern for Mark. She reveals to them that she is Adam Eve, which shocks William but doesn't shock Amber, even though neither she or William recognizes her as Adam Eve.
Wow, that guy is toast.
Oh, I see. So, like, none of these sound good, huh? Oh, crap. I gotta go.
It'd be interesting to see what else is in store for Adam Eve in the next season of Invincible. And that concludes this deep dive character session of Superhero Club. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I'm your host, Stephanie Williams. Don't forget to like this video for more episodes of Superhero Club. Remember, you can check out the first season of Invincible on Prime Video and stay tuned for more Invincible coming in late 2023.